Hey guys, we are live here in the Prairie Greenhouse of the ProMedica Museum of Natural History. Today we're going to be talking about pollinators. As the calendar turns to April, we start thinking about spring. The whole April showers bring May flowers, flowers bring out pollinators to help them pollinate, look pretty, and really spruce up spring for us. So we thought this would be a cool topic to talk about today, and there's so much information to talk about with pollinators. We're going to be talking to Mitch in our education department, as he is one of our resident pollinator experts around here. So as you guys are joining us, let us know that you're here. Let us know you can hear us, you can see us, all of that's good. And as soon as we get a few people in with us, we will start. But in the meantime, let's do some shout outs. So hi Carter, hi Sydney, hi Olivia, Kane, and Phoenix. Thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome to April, you guys. No April Fool's jokes here today. We're just going to be talking about pollinators instead. Hi Haley. Thanks for letting us know you can hear us and see us, Stephanie. Hi, Devin. Hi, Paisley. Hi, Lacey. Good morning, Sophia. Hi, Karen. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Abby, for letting us know we look and sound good. Hi, Noah and Leah. We're glad you guys are able to join us this morning. Hi, Cooper and Camden. All right, guys, we are going to get started here in just a moment. Hi, Ashton. Hi, Gavin, Eliana, and Isabella. Hey, Ann, thanks for tuning in. Hi, Carter and Grayson. Oh, Amber, we're excited too, thank you. And Theo, William, and Marcus. Hi, Emerson and Sawyer, Sophia, and Oliver. We've got everybody here today. This is awesome, guys. All right, so we are talking pollinators today. All of those important insects and other animals that you're going to learn later that help all of our plants grow. And they help produce the food that we eat, and they are incredibly important. They're those little animals that go buzz, and they may whirl around you in the summertime. You may think sometimes they're a nuisance, but they are far more important than they are annoying. So we're going to talk all about that today with Mitch from our education department. But before we get started, we've got just a couple announcements for you. As always, thank you for tuning in and staying connected with your zoo during this difficult time. Just like everyone, we are trying to find new and novel ways to stay connected with our supporters. We are doing meals on the go from our catering department and our executive chef that you saw yesterday if you tuned in to our cooking session in her kitchen. This week's entrees are beef stew and hot turkey. So place your orders at toledozoo.org. You can still get dinner for tomorrow night, and then you just come by the Broadway entrance between 4 and 6 and pick it up curbside. Really easy, really good food. Corey and I can both attest to it. We tried it yesterday, delicious. Also, our education department is always on the forefront of new thinking and new ways to connect with you guys. They are doing a bunch of virtual programs, virtual classrooms, virtual horticulture departments. They're going to be debuting a new program on how to train your pets at home starting next week. So go to toledozoo.org and click on the educational tools, and it will give you the entire variety of what they're doing. They have all of these virtual options that cost $3 for members and $5 for non-members. Great way to supplement some of those science classes or just learn about something new. And of course, if you're ordering all that stuff on Amazon to be delivered to the house, all those groceries and supplies and everything, be sure that you've marked Toledo Zoo as your charity beneficiary for Amazon Smile. All right, I think we got everything in there. Oh, one more, we always have our donate button at the bottom, our Facebook fundraiser, and toledozoo.org to donate if you are enjoying all of this and can help us continue to sustain our future. We appreciate it. All right, Mitch, let's talk pollinators. What can you tell us to start with here?
Well, first of all, we're in our native prairie, and this is the type of habitat you would see naturally in Lucas County, Ohio, particularly out in western Lucas County. And the flowers there rely on pollinators, just like any flower, in order to produce seed. So in order to reproduce, flowers need pollinators. Can't do it without it. With some, others are wind pollinated. That's a little bit different. So lots of different types of pollinators that we normally think about, and particularly bees. But I mentioned this, is that most of us think of the European honeybee. And the European honeybee, just by its very name, it's not native to North America. We have a lot of other pollinators that are native to North America, particularly things like bumblebees, leaf mining, leaf cutting bees, mason bees, squash bees, sweat bees. All of those are very important types of pollinators, particularly on our native plants. Obviously, pollinators are also extremely important in crop production. So generally speaking, we think of this is that 1 of every 3 bites of food that we take is because of the services provided by some kind of a pollinator, whether it's a bee or a fly or a mosquito or a moth. So pollinators are extremely important to people in crop production. Here in the native greenhouse, we're a little bit more advanced than we are, let's say, outside. Not seeing many flowers other than daffodils outside right now, but here in the greenhouse we have these white flowers that Corey's showing you. These are a type of dogwood, and I'll do my dad joke today. So how can you tell a dogwood from any other tree? It's by its bark, of course.
Oh.
I know, my normal dad joke here.
I love it.
So anyway, this is a dogwood that you would find growing in the oak openings and a lot of the other surrounding area. We also have some yellow blooming plants in here. They were kind of in the back. Those are a prairie plant that we have growing throughout western Lucas County. Those are called coreopsis. And so normally in a summer or as we get later in the spring, you would see bees flying all over those. What's really interesting is that the bees and other insects have really incredible relationships with these flowers. It's kind of a game that they play. So for instance, bees aren't purposely going and pollinating flowers. They're going to the flowers in order to get some treat. Okay, that might be nectar that they would take, like say in the case of a bumblebee, back to the hive. Or they're getting pollen to take back to the hive in order to raise their young. So the bees get a reward for going there, and in the meantime, the pollen, which is on the male part of the plant, is spread all over the bee, and then it takes it and then it fertilizes the eggs in the plant, which produce the seed. So it's kind of a game that they play. So the bees and the pollinators get something that is special to them, and the plant then gets to reproduce and produce seed in order to propagate itself. We have some really interesting animals up here on our dune too, and these actually play a part in this whole cycle. We have some box turtles up here on our dune, and box turtles are a native to Northwest Ohio. You would find them out on the dunes as you do here in our greenhouse. And so they kind of are on the other end of this spectrum with pollination. So when, let's say, a blackberry or a black raspberry, when they're pollinated, they produce a fruit, and the fruit has the seeds. And so once again, the plant has a tasty treat for something like a box turtle. The box turtles would eat that, and then they would crawl away. And then when they go to the bathroom, they would spread those seeds, and then they would grow and germinate in other areas in their habitat. And so it's a whole cycle that that's all started with plants being pollinated.
Very cool. All right, we have a few questions coming in here. So let's first take Noah's question. Is there a beehive in here?
No, we don't have a beehive in here, and a beehive, again, that's kind of goes along with European honeybees. We do have bumblebees that we place in here though, which is kind of interesting. Bumblebees actually you can buy by the box from producers. Greenhouse growers buy boxes of bumblebees because bumblebees are very important in pollinating peppers and in pollinating tomatoes. So in fact, bumblebees They have something that they do called buzz pollination and only a few other species of bees can do. So on a flower of a tomato plant, the pollen is actually trapped inside the male portion. It's not on the outside like it is. So they grab a hold of that male portion and then they buzz their wings. And when they buzz their wings, it causes the pollen to jump out and onto their body. And that's one of the few insects that can do that.
Wow, that's
you
really
can
cool.
replicate that actually on a tomato plant by getting a tuning fork, hitting the tuning fork, touching the anther of the tomato flower, and you can actually see pollen jump out of the anther when you do that.
Wow.
So bumblebees do that. Other plants that also require buzz pollination, blueberries for instance, which are native in Northwest Ohio on dunes just like what we have here. And so bumblebees are very important in pollinating those. And another type of bee called a mining bee. And mining bees are actually really interesting. They look like baby bumblebees. They're really teeny, but they look just like a bumblebee. But we have to remember bumblebees, their babies are actually larvae or pupa inside the hive. So we're only going to see the larger adult bumblebees.
Did you guys even know, because I will admit that I did not, that there were that many species of bees? Just in Mitch's talking here in the last 6 minutes, I know he's mentioned a dozen different kinds of bees. I had no idea. I think we're all learning something pretty cool here today. And speaking of that, he has some pinned insects. This is how researchers collect specimens or insects so that we can study them and learn more about them. And he has one here that is incredibly rare and has a really cool Toledo Zoo connection to its story.
Yes, this one right here, this is called a rusty-patched bumblebee. And rusty-patched bumblebees were in the past, like 20, 25 years ago, extremely common. They have declined in such a manner that they are now federally endangered, so they're protected. That particular bumblebee was actually collected on zoo grounds back in 2013 and is the only sighting of the rusty-patched bumblebee in Ohio in about the last 15 years. And we actually found it here on the grounds of the Toledo Zoo, which is really significant. Then we had researchers come around, they were looking for other colonies. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find any, but that doesn't mean that they're not here. Basically, it's just all serendipity. I was in the right place at the right time to see it. So basically just getting people out looking for them is really important because I think that they're still around. We just haven't been able to find them.
That is incredible. Brinley asks, besides bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies, what other animals pollinate?
Oh, there's a lot of different animals that pollinate. Moths, for instance, pollinate night blooming flowers for the most part. You mentioned hummingbirds. Actually, you mentioned butterflies. Butterflies aren't particularly good pollinators, to be honest with you. They do pollinate, but they're not great. Bats are huge and very important, especially in the tropics in pollinating. All the bats here we have in Northwest Ohio are insect-eating bats, but if you go down to the tropics, so move over to our tropical greenhouse, you would be able to see lots of bats that actually feed on flower nectar and pollen. And they're really responsible for pollinating a lot of the flowers that are found in the tropics.
Very cool. All right, Theo says, where do bees go in the winter?
Well, it depends on the species of bees. Honeybees that we're all familiar with, they're called eusocial. So they gather in hives and in groups. They actually just hang out in the beehive the entire winter. The honey that they collect is used for them to get through the winter time. So they eat it during the winter when there's nothing else to eat. There's no flowers blooming, so they spend the entire winter in the hive. Bumblebees, on the other hand, even though they're eusocial, they're colonial, the only one that survives there is the new queen. And what she does is she crawls underneath a log or underneath bark and she hibernates it away in the winter. And then just about now, they'll start coming out. That queen will start looking for a place to raise a new colony.
So bees are practicing social isolation right now too?
Yes, they are.
They're just like us. Yeah. They're stuck inside, guys. Nicole asks, how do bees communicate?
Well, great question. Honeybees have a very sophisticated communication system, and there's been a lot of research done on that. They actually use dances. Okay, so they have a circle dance that they do. They have other kinds of dances they do, but the dances actually communicate a lot to the other bees in the hive. They communicate the quality of the nectar source. It communicates the direction of that nectar source from the hive, and it also communicates the distance to that nectar source and these dances that they do. So yes, very sophisticated means of communication that some pollinators have with each other, particularly the insects.
Very smart bees.
Yeah, very smart bees indeed.
Wow. Grayson asks, do only girl bees have stingers?
That is correct. Only girl bees have stingers. Those are called the worker bees. All workers in a colony of bees, whether it's a bumblebee or a honeybee, they're all female. And that stinger is actually a modified egg-laying device. It's modified into a stinger, and obviously we all know that they use it to defend their hives. I know I've been stung several times. It's not a pleasant ordeal.
Stephanie says, is it true without honeybees, this world could be depleted?
Well, actually, you're talking about honeybees, but I'm talking about like all bees, all right? So honeybees are important, but if any of us are following the news right now, honeybees are actually in real trouble. There's something called colony collapse disorder that scientists really don't have a handle on why honeybee colonies are failing as much as they are. Because of that, we really need to rely on our native pollinators, things like the mining bees I mentioned, bumblebees, native sweat bees, squash bees. We really need to rely on them and not so much that honeybee. But it is absolutely true. If we don't have pollinators, we are going to be in real trouble in terms of food production.
Absolutely. And that is part of why Corey's showing you guys some graphics right now. Part of why we put together this native prairie greenhouse, part of why our Wild Toledo conservation team took on creating native prairies to provide for our pollinators, because their populations are declining, but they are so very important. So we have a series of graphics here in the greenhouse talking about why we don't want to kill bees. Many people, that is their reaction when they see a bee, is to kill it, but we need bees. And we also have graphics that talk about the process of pollination, the importance of all of the pollinators and all the different animals and plants that are found in here. So let's get back to a couple more questions here. Devin, age 6, wants to know, how much pollen can one bee gather?
That's a great question. I've never seen any articles or anything that actually measures that. But one thing that's really interesting is those the honeybees I mentioned and the bumblebees, the females, the workers actually have pollen baskets on their hind legs. And actually they're not really baskets, they're just a wide portion of their back leg that has real stiff hairs. And so what they do is they'll take, when they get pollen all over them, they'll take their legs, they'll scrape it and put it inside that little basket. When that basket is full, they'll take it back to the colony, and that basket of pollen is extremely important food. It's high in protein, and that protein is needed to raise the baby bees. You can't raise the baby bees without that protein in that pollen. Really important stuff.
All right, so Devin, it's basically how much pollen they can carry.
Yeah, that's about it. Yep.
All right, Carter asks, why do bees buzz?
Well, you're just hearing their wings. Okay, so all bees belong to the same order of insects, and they have 4 wings. And when those wings basically hit each other, it creates kind of a buzzing sound. It's kind of like if you ever have a piece of paper flapping in the wind, you'll notice that it flaps and it makes a noise. Well, it's the same thing with the bees.
All right. And Beth asks, do all bees make honey?
No, not all bees make honey. Not all bees do that. This is kind of funny, and we never think about it, but most bees are actually solitary. They do not live in a colony. All right, and most of the time what they'll do is that sometimes they'll feed their the larvae, the little grubs, they'll feed them actually like more meat products, so they're carnivores. Okay, so they might do that. They would feed them like a little cake of pollen and honey that they mix together. All right, and so they'll lay an egg, that little grub will hatch out, and then there's a little larder in there for that grub once it hatches out. And so basically that one queen, that one female that's laying the egg, she basically packs that little hole in the ground with those cakes and acting as like a little storage unit for those bees to grow up.
Wow, that is so interesting. Samuel and Mackenzie ask, do bumblebees get their name because they're clumsy?
You know what, I don't really know the answer to that. I really don't know how they got the common name bumblebees. They look clumsy, but in fact, they're not. In fact, I've heard there's a kind of a urban legend that bumblebees, by their very design, should be able to fly.
Yes.
Okay, but that has been disproved many times by various engineers and entomologists who have studied that.
And Morgan and Bennett ask, how warm is it in the greenhouse here?
Actually, it's really pleasant in here today. I'd say it's probably in the low to mid 60s. It's really nice in here today.
Yes. And Roan, we are in the museum. We're in the very back of the first floor in the native prairie greenhouse. Paisley asks, do bumblebees find a new home every year?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the only one that survives at the end of the year. So they raise the colony, they produce a new queen, she mates, and then after she mates, she goes and hibernates, and the entire colony dies. So there's none left. The only one from that colony will be that queen who hibernates over the winter and starts a brand new colony the next spring.
And that leads right into Karen's question. How does a bee become a queen bee?
Well, it's by the food that they're fed. So like in the instance of honeybees, the workers have a gland in their head that produces a product that is called royal jelly. And in fact, you can go to a health food store and purchase royal jelly for consumption by humans, believe it or not. But that particular substance is fed to a grub or a baby bee, and then that substance is what helps turn it into a queen.
All right. And Angie says, or asks, why does honey have a different color and different taste from different areas?
Well, actually, it's based on the type of flower that the bee is collecting the nectar from. So I'll give you an example. Clover honey is really light and delicate in flavor. But buckwheat honey, okay, is very dark and has a really strong flavor, almost like molasses. So it all has everything to do with the flower that's producing the nectar. Some are light and delicate, very flavorful. Orange is another one. Tupelo is another one that's light, very sought after by people. The one that comes from buckwheat, you're probably going to use that in cooking.
Okay. Noah says, is it true that when a bee stings you, it dies?
Yes. Well, it depends on the bee. Okay, so if you're talking about a honeybee, they have barbed stingers. Okay, and so that barb will stick in your skin, and basically they have to pull out part of their internal organs in order to escape. And when they do that, they're eventually going to die.
All right. AJ asks, how long does a worker bee live?
Well, it depends on the time of year and the season, but they're probably going to live 3 weeks to a month at the most. What's really interesting is as they grow, they take on different jobs. So they'll start out in the hive, maybe being a guard bee, so they're guarding the colony, a nurse bee, so that they're taking care of the young. And then later in life, they become a worker, and the workers wear out pretty quick. And then usually after only a couple of weeks of that job, they end up dying.
All right. And Sarah wants to know, what material is the stinger? Like, is it an organ? Is it a muscle?
Well, and what it is, it's the egg-laying apparatus for the females that's been modified to be a stinger. So the egg-laying device in the queen still works as an egg-laying device. In the worker, though, it has modifications to it, barbs on it, to deliver venom that causes an intense amount of pain considering the size of that honeybee that just stung you.
Absolutely. All right, the next question here is, why is there just one queen bee and no king?
Well, actually, those are all just labels we give them. The queens actually produce a pheromone that actually controls the activity of the entire hive. So a pheromone is a chemical that's released in the air, can't be seen, but it's picked up by the worker bees with their antenna, and that basically controls the entire hive. If you have two queens in there, there's basically competition, and usually one will be killed and the other one will survive. The king bees are really what we would, I guess, call drones. Those are the male bees, and I kind of joke around the male bees. The only thing the male bees do is sit around the hive, eat, and then they go out and mate with the queen. All right. In fact, they use up stores that would definitely help that colony get through the winter. And usually the workers drag the drones out at the end of the season to die. They just literally drag them out of the hive.
Oh my goodness. All right, so Grayson says, if the queen bee dies, do the other bees go find another queen bee in another hive, or how does that work?
Excellent question. It depends on if there's still eggs and baby bees in the hive, even though the queen has died. Remember, I told you earlier that the worker bees, those nurse bees, would feed a bee royal jelly. Mm-hmm. That royal jelly then would cause that bee that's being raised to become a queen. All right, now that queen would have to mate then. They would have to leave the hive temporarily and come back after they've mated. But they would requeen themselves is what we call it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a queen in waiting.
Well, maybe, maybe not. There might be a queen in waiting. If there isn't, then they would go to work to produce a queen.
Okay, very nice. Harmony wants to know, how much honey can a bee make?
About a teaspoon in its lifetime.
Wow,
That's
teaspoon.
It.
That's
a teaspoon. And now listen to this. And I used to keep bees. I don't do it anymore. But on a really strong colony, you can get 80 to 100 pounds of honey. Now think about that. Okay, so you have a teaspoon of honey being produced by one bee, and then you're pulling 80 pounds of honey off of a hive. How many trips had to be made by that worker in order to produce all of that honey?
My goodness. That just boggles my mind.
Yeah, I know. So busy as a bee definitely comes from a really good place on that.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing, yes. Yeah.
Wow, this is very cool. All right, guys. I think we've made it through all of your questions. Let's just recap a little bit here. We are in the Native Prairie Greenhouse in the ProMedica Museum of Natural History, and we are in here learning about pollinators, because as the plants begin to grow, come out of winter, our pollinators are going to come out and they're going to pollinate the plants to help reproduce flowers, and as we've talked about, to make honey and to grow the crops that we eat. So it's very important work that we're doing here. And we thought this was kind of the perfect time as the calendar turns to April and we start thinking spring. This was a perfect time to talk about some pollinators. So we've learned amazing amounts of things today. As I said earlier, I had no idea there were so many types of bees. We're gonna end here with one final question from Lane and Ella. Why are bees black and yellow?
Great question. In nature, there are patterns and colors that usually act as warning signals. Usually it's yellow, orange, red, maybe even blue. But that black and yellow coloration is a warning sign to would-be predators like birds that if you mess with me, you might regret it. And in fact, there are flies and beetles that actually mimic bees in order to fool potential predators so that they're not eaten. So that there are other insects that basically put on a costume, so to speak, to fool other animals that might prey upon them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right, so you guys have learned all about bees today. And I guess it's fair to say then that we are going to send you off to be busy little bees and enjoy the rest of your day. We will see you guys tomorrow. As always, go to toledozoo.org to check out all of the ways you can stay connected with us while the zoo's closed. We are still #ZooOpenOnline. Talk to you guys next time.